Hey, soldiers, here in the United States, we're starting to see an acceleration of a secession from the Union, an economic secession from the Union. Now, we've chronicled in the past states like Wyoming and Kansas all authoring legislation, authoring legislation that would make gold and silver a more prominent aspect of the state economies. We've seen Florida. We profiled Florida putting in some anti-CBDC legislation. So we've got a situation now where states are starting to flat out and publicly reject the system that undergirds these Federal Reserve notes. These Federal Reserve notes that are losing economic influence, they're losing political influence, and they're losing value at a prodigious clip. So what we have here is the state of Texas. They are the latest to say, hey, we're going to put some legislation in place, or at least pursue it, to make gold a more prominent part of our economy in order to diversify away from the dollar and possibly get away from that CBDC and it having untold influence over your life, quashing your privacy, and giving the government control over your economic and other decisions. Now, look, Texas is not the first state to, go in this direction. All of these states that I'm going to name currently have some sort of gold and silver, real money, God's money type of rules in place that allow you to either use gold and silver as legal tender, or they are building systems that require the state to have a gold depository, gold as legal tender, as I said, a whole bunch of options, but they're looking away from the dollar. And this is going on right here in the United States. I watched an interview with Kevin O'Leary, and he made a lot of good points on that interview, but one of the points that he was making was, the dollar's got nothing to fear. And I do agree that the dollar is going to be the most widely held fiat currency, for the foreseeable future. Even after the mid-2030s, when that US dollar slips below 50% of reserve holdings globally, it will still be the most widely held at 48%. So yes, the dollar is going to continue to lose value. Inflationary pressures and taxation, higher taxation to compensate for that, are going to be an ever-present and growing specter in the lives of Americans. But yes, the dollar, although it's not going to be totally supplanted, it is not going to be what it used to be. So wise economic minds in these states like Wyoming, Arizona, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah, they already know what the deal is. Now, look for more states to jump on that type of bandwagon, because what the states lack that the federal government has, the states don't have a printing press. The states do not control federal monetary policy, and the states are responsible for balancing their budgets. So unlike the Fed, we're in this situation now where, just raise the debt limit. Don't you wish you could just raise your debt limit? The states cannot do that. They have to account for the dollars that they are spending. So recently here, a Texas committee has passed a bill to create 100% reserve gold and silver-backed transactional currencies. At this point, guys, I want you to go ahead and enlist, subscribe, become a soldier of finance. It's easy to do. Hit the subscribe button. Let me know you did so in the comments, and I will salute you. For all of those who haven't got their salute, just keep putting reminders in the comment section, because Google doesn't always show me the comments in a timely fashion. Now, everybody, hit the thumbs up. Let this Google, YouTube algorithm know that this is content you want to see perpetuated. All right, so on May 2nd, a Texas House committee passed a bill to create a 100% reserve gold and silver-backed transactional currency. Enactment of this legislation would create an option for people to conduct business in sound money. set the stage to undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money and possibly create a viable alternative to a central bank digital currency. Now, let's talk about that second point they made, undermine the Fed's monopoly on money. A lot of people reflexively think, oh, well, you can't have any other type of money because the dollar is it. Listen, what is money, or fiat currency in this case? It is a unit of exchange. So when I take that dollar into a retail establishment, we both agree, myself and the retail establishment agree, that this fiat currency has a certain value to it, a value that I can exchange for goods and services, okay? Why can't me and that establishment come to that same agreement on some other form of value, some other unit of exchange? And yes, the crypto folks out there, they get that. They're right on that. Now, it's not really a beef, but my concern with crypto has always been the fact that the government would try to interfere with that, with building those systems out. And what have we seen? Hell, we've seen Elizabeth Warren come out and say she is organizing a war on crypto. We've seen Carstens over at the Bank of International Settlements say the same thing. There is a war on crypto. So these legislators and non-governmental actors, they are clear about how they feel about crypto and using the full force of the law as it stands and legislation and regulation to quash crypto. But what's different here is that the states are stepping in, okay? And usually when it comes to law, you can't make a law that is, you can't make a law that is less stringent than the federal law, okay? But in this case, we're dealing with actually creating an alternative to the unit of exchange, the widely accepted unit of exchange. Again, that fiat currency, that dollar that is losing value and influence. Representative Mark DeRazio, he's a Republican down in Texas, in their legislature, introduced HB 4903 on March 10th, and it has since garnered a bipartisan coalition of 42 co-sponsors. The legislation would require the state comptroller to establish and provide for the issuance of gold and silver specie, and also establish digital currencies that are 100% backed by gold and silver and 100% redeemable in cash, gold, or silver. Now, specie, what they're simply referring to there is a precious metal that has been stamped into a coin and has a certain value assigned to it, all right? But they are going to combine the God's money principle, gold and silver, with the new technology. And as you heard, they're going to establish digital currencies backed by gold and silver. Now, most of the states, again, for reasons I mentioned prior, have to be much more fiscally responsible than the federal government because of balanced budget amendments. Now, obviously, California has lost its mind because it's out there promising everything to everybody. And, we'll see how that works out. But it's ignoring a lot of economic principles. In establishing gold and silver specie, the comptroller of Texas would be required to authorize the Texas Bullion Depository as issuer and ensure that the holder of the specie may use the specie as legal tender in payment of debt and readily transfer it to another person. So perfectly interchangeable. The state, in this case Texas, usually when we talk about the state, capital S, we're talking about the government. But in this case, the state of Texas is laying down rules, potentially rules that will be passed into law. This is just in the committee stage, formative stages. It's gotten a good amount of co-sponsors. We'll see if it becomes legislation and goes on and passes the House, the Senate of Texas, and then is signed by Greg Abbott. But they are saying that, look, we'll back this. And again, those states have a better track record of being better financial stewards than the federal government. So they're coming into it, in my estimation, with more, with a better reputation of trustworthiness. All right. The comptroller would also be required to create a mechanism to use 100% backed gold and silver digital currencies in everyday transactions. Physical gold and silver backing the digital currency would be stored in a pooled account at the Texas State Bullion Depository. In practice, individuals would be able to purchase transactional currency representing the smallest fractions of physical gold and silver. The money would be used to purchase gold and silver that would be held in the already open Texas Bullion Depository. Okay, so that's already established. Individuals would be able to redeem their transactional currency for dollars, gold, or silver on demand. On May 2nd, the House State Affairs Committee passed HB 4903 by a 7-6 vote. So it's out of committee, even though it narrowly got out. In an outpouring of strong support from the grassroots in Texas. And remember, Texas is kind of like a different animal. They look at themselves, based on their history, as, really being, I'm not going to say rebellious, but more independent spirited than a lot of the rest of the states do. So the grassroots down there, in a 78-page document, that document detailed just hundreds of messages of support for this legislation, for this process. It was presented to the committee members during a hearing last month. Okay, so the impact of this is one of several bills introduced in Texas this year to promote sound money, including legislation to establish state gold and silver reserves, and a bill to make gold and silver legal tender in the Lone Star State. The creation of state-issued gold-backed and silver-backed digital currencies would create currency competition with Federal Reserve notes and undermine the Fed's monopoly on money. It would also provide a sound money-backed competitor if the Federal Reserve implements a central bank digital currency. Because we all know, even though they protest too loudly and say, oh, it's not going to be programmable, we're not going to stop you from doing this, that, or the other. If you look at the history of any pervasive legislation in this country, be it the income tax, be it the Patriot Act, all of it has always been taken to the absolute extreme and has resulted in a usurpation of liberty from the citizen, okay? And CBDCs from the start are primed to do exactly that. Broadly speaking, by making gold and silver conveniently available for regular daily transactions by the general public, gold and silver-backed digital currency would create the potential for a wide-reaching effect. All right, so let's take a look at the central bank digital currency aspect of this. A gold-backed digital currency would create an alternative to allow individuals and businesses to avoid a CBDC. Now, my question would be, right now I'm here in Maryland. To what extent would I be able to use the Texas gold and silver-backed digital currency? Okay, now, I would imagine Maryland being a ultra blue state, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with it. They're big government. Isn't it funny how liberals turned from not trusting government to be all about government, okay? And government can do or say nothing wrong. Isn't it funny how that transition occurred almost overnight? Digital currencies exist as virtual banknotes or coins held in a digital wallet on your computer or smartphone. The difference between a central bank digital currency and peer-to-peer electronic cash such as Bitcoin is that the value of the CBDC is backed and controlled by the government, just like traditional fiat currency. So that's a major difference between what Texas is setting up and the dollar. Texas is saying, hey, we're going to back ours by gold and silver. While the federal government is saying we're just backing ours up by the full faith and credit of the United States and our ability to kick in your door and enforce tax policy, okay? And gold and silver theoretically is infinitely divisible. I mean, you can break it down pretty discreetly. Of course, that takes a different type of labor than, say, a infinitely divisible Bitcoin, but the principle remains the same. At the root of the move toward a CBDC is, quote, the war on cash. The elimination of cash creates the potential for the government to track and even control consumer spending. Absolutely. We know that the Fed's monetary policy would look a lot different if they didn't have to raise interest rates to slow spending. If they could just use a programmable CBDC to say, okay, well, let's throttle the spending ability of a portion of the society or the entire society. But I say a portion because something tells me that Bill Gates will not be throttled, okay, ever, all right? Imagine if there was no cash, it would be impossible to hide even the smallest, there's a fox behind me, smallest transaction from government eyes. Something as simple as your morning trip to Starbucks wouldn't be a secret from government officials. So we're going to continue to watch what happens with this Texas legislation. And we know that Kansas, Wyoming, and the other states are moving more toward that type of economic regime where they're broadcasting, they're telegraphing. We have a low trust level in the fiat currency regime that is underpinned by the machinations of the Fed. All right, now, what I want you to do is I want you to go take a look at this particular video. It's one of our latest videos where we're talking about how things just got worse for Budweiser. Okay, this is a corporation that has made a pretty interesting move with a certain social media influencer. But look at how the move has backfired now in two ways. Budweiser's getting it from both ends. And the question remains, will the brand ever be the same? All right, check it out, guys. I'll talk to you soon.